This is Fantasy Football Night in America. Welcome into the FFPC High Stakes Fantasy Football Show here live on the Better Sports Network. I am your host for this evening, Eric Balkman, at Eric Balkman on the X. Of course, you know me from the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, the Fantasy Football Players Championship, and the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. Pleased to be welcoming in my co-host for this evening. You know all his work at DynastyLeagueFootball.com, at DLF Football on the X. You follow him on the X at HayB3. It is Brandon Haye, also doing work covering the University of Central Florida for the league winners. Brandon, good evening and welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to join. I haven't been able to do a podcast in a while, so it's nice to come on and do some talking.
We had this is probably a month and a half or so ago. Neil Dutton came on from RotoViz 4 for 4, and he said the same thing to me. He's like, I haven't done one of these in a while. And we had a really good time. Like I don't know if it's one of those things where you just talk a lot after, because Neil had a lot to say. We learned a lot from him as well. And I have no doubt the same thing is going to happen with you tonight, Brandon. So glad that our viewers are in for a treat tonight. If you want to be in for a treat playing fantasy football, check out the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball and Superflex Best Ball tournaments. These tournaments have been going since January. They are going to close 2 weeks from today, which is when the NFL draft begins in glorious Green Bay, Wisconsin. A $40,000 and a $10,000 grand prize are at stake, $125 and $35 entry fees to join these. Drafts available right now, 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clocks. But I think those slow drafts are going to start winding down here pretty quick. So if you want to get in a slow draft in those, make sure you're joining now at myffpc.com. While you're there, you can check out the FFPC Big Gorilla Tournament, a $1 million grand prize. You're going to get a $50 discount for every third team that you buy. Drafts going off right now, live and slow. The Early Rampage Tournament is going off right now as well. So if you join the Big Gorilla, you're automatically entered in the Early Rampage Tournament. It's 2 tournaments for the price of one entry fee, which is awesome. And, of course, the 7 Bananas promo is live. Anytime you are getting the 7-pick consecutive times, you're winning free teams with the FFPC. And if you get it 5 times in a row, we're paying for a Jungle Safari for 4 for you. So check that out at myffpc.com. And I'm burying the lead here. Dynasty Orphans, we are under 100 of them to go for 2025. These are probably the best deals we've ever offered as long as we've been holding Dynasty Leagues with the FFPC, which has been a decade and a half, 1,800-plus leagues. None have ever folded, and we do have some limited $100 startups going on right now at myffpc.com, so make sure you're checking that out. Those entry fees normally for these orphans go from anywhere from $77 to $5,000. You can pick up multiple $1 teams right now, manage them to glory. You're basically getting a free team here for year one. So check it out. myffpc.com is where to go. Matt Deutsch is our producer tonight. Let's get off and running here, Brandon. Fox Sports' Jordan Schultz has reported that Alabama quarterback Jalen Milroe is going to be visiting with the Giants. He's going to be visiting with the Rams, and he's going to be visiting the Seahawks. This coming off his Browns visit that happened earlier this week. They are going to be looking at Milroe, these 3 teams, all 3 of them. What do they have in common? They have veteran quarterbacks at the helm and maybe not long-term solutions there. Matthew Stafford just turned 37. You could look to develop Jalen Milroe as the successor there in Los Angeles long-term. And obviously Stafford might play a couple years, and I feel like Milroe might need a couple of years on the bench, sort of like to get acclimated to the NFL. He could be the starter with the Giants or the Seahawks if he's drafted by them, maybe as soon as the end of this season. You never know how those things are going to go. Dual threat ability, although he is more potent with the legs than the arm right now. Brandon, I don't know. I mean, you've been following this probably closer than I have. It seemed like Milroe was sort of an afterthought. Like, this guy can run, but his passing chops are so far behind. He's going to be a project. I really can't trust him for fantasy. But now I'm seeing like this guy might even sneak up into the late first round. A team could be trading up into the first round to draft him. I don't know how likely that is. What has been sort of your scouting outlook, your analysis on Jalen Milroe once he moves on from the Crimson Tide to the National Football League?
Yeah, so I know he was kind of getting a little bit of hype during the season. And then he had a horrible bowl game, and then he decided to go to the Senior Bowl, which I was at the Senior Bowl, and to be totally honest, he shouldn't have gone, because that just was not a good setting for him, because it's a lot of passing drills, you don't see your legs. So you don't really necessarily see that. I was shocked that he accepted the invite to the draft because that's for the first round players.
Mm-hmm.
And I just kind of had thought he might not be going in the first round. But some of those teams might jump up a little bit to get him. I do wonder if the Anthony Richardson experiment went better, if he would have been thought of a little better, because I think he's a better product than coming out of college than Anthony Richardson. He's I think better at everything. Still a long ways to go passing the ball. So that's kind of my thoughts on him. Like you said, I do think he probably needs a year or two. Maybe you can, who knows? We kind of thought that way with Lamar, and they kind of got some, little packages at the end of the, his first season, and then he kind of grew the second season. So, and I just never thought Lamar would be this good. So, I could be wrong. It's just, Milroe just doesn't have the passing ability right now, accuracy wise, at least.
How far along was Lamar Jackson's passing acumen coming into the NFL out of Louisville? How would you compare that to what Jalen Milroe is right now for Alabama?
I would say a lot better. I think Milroe has a really strong arm. I think he struggles with making the right reads. Some of the games you'll watch receivers get frustrated because if it's not the first or second read, he doesn't see them being open. So just there's not a consistency throwing the ball. And I do wonder, how, because they had to build an offense around Lamar until he was ready to fully become a better passer. A lot of RPOs, a lot of runs, a lot of throws to the tight end. And in Alabama, they had receivers. So it wasn't like, he was somewhere they didn't have receivers. So that's what's kind of going on. But the thing is, too, this quarterback class this year, not a lot of people are very high on it. As last year. So, after the first two, after Ward and Sanders, there's an open spot for that third quarterback.
And it could be Milroe. And I think what does excite us as far as fantasy owners go, Brandon, is the fact that he is so talented with his legs. And even if he's mediocre, even if he tops out as above average as a quarterback in the NFL, we still like him for fantasy. Look at Justin Fields, he's certainly not the greatest passer in the world, and yet he gets a starting gig with the Jets. He moves up from quarterback 24 in the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament ADP to like quarterback 13 or quarterback 12, because all he needs is the opportunity, and he can create with his legs, and he's good enough to get it done passing. I don't view Milroe as doing that in the NFL year one, but year two, like you said, kind of all bets are off. We'll see what happens with Jalen Milroe going forward. Okay, he is the quarterback out of Alabama. Let's talk about the running back out of North Carolina, Omarion Hampton. Now, Omarion Hampton has sort of become the de facto number 2 running back in this draft as far as what we think is going to happen 2 Thursdays from now. Mike DeFabo, who covers who covers the Steelers for The Athletic, says Pittsburgh is actually hosting Omarion Hampton for a visit. Hampton is a 2-time All-American, was a guy a month ago we thought was going to be picked in the early second round. It almost seems like it's all but certain that he'll be picked somewhere in the first round, perhaps even in the top 15 picks, which would be crazy, or maybe not crazy. I don't know. Najee Harris is no longer in Pittsburgh, as a reminder. He's in Los Angeles. Hampton, over the last 8 seasons, in terms of his average max speed based on Pro Football Focus, is in the top 10. Now, Pittsburgh has the 21st overall pick in the draft right now. If the Steelers take him, he's going to join Jaylen Warren, and he's going to join Kenny Gainwell, who we'll talk about in a little bit. But I would imagine Hampton would be the lead back in that backfield. Here's the thing, Brandon, no matter where he goes, if he is a first-round pick, worst case scenario, he is the 1A immediately. Teams are not going to spend a first-round pick on a running back and then have him sit and bring him on at the end of the season. So Hampton would obviously factor into our best ball plans, our rookie draft plans, and our redraft plans as well. Do you have any strong feelings on Hampton? I have brought this up on this show before, that I heard whispers that there are certain draft pundits out there that would put him on the same level or maybe a half tier below Ashton Jeanty, we'll talk about coming up in the second segment here tonight. But your thoughts on Hampton? This could be the first overall pick, or it's not first overall pick, the first running back drafted in many other drafts. Not so with Jeanty this year, but how close is he to the talent that Jeanty brings to the table for Hampton?
I think he's very, very talented. And especially in the last year and a half, that North Carolina offense was just him. And he was running against 7 to 8 man boxes, and still he's got a little bit of best of both worlds, in the sense of he's a bruising back that can run through tackles, but he also has the speed, and he's actually a fairly good receiver. I think as far as running backs, I know we're going to talk about him later, but I would have Hampton actually as the third running back in this class, because I like TreVeyon Henderson quite a bit. But I know he's on the sheet for later. But
yeah,
I think
we'll get to him for sure.
Yeah, I think Hampton isn't that different from Jeanty. I think Jeanty is more explosive, more of a slasher, and Hampton's more of your like traditional runner, which I think the Steelers with Arthur Smith when he had Derrick Henry, I think it could be very similar in what they do with that. And I know we're going to get to Kenny Gainwell. I'm a big Kenny Gainwell fan. So if they draft Hampton, that obviously takes down the excitement on both him and Warren.
So with Hampton, just because you have him as your number 3 back doesn't mean you dislike him. He's still number 3
Correct.
for you. You just happen to like Henderson a little bit better.
Yeah, I think I do. I just like what Henderson can kind of do. Probably more big plays. That we'll talk about this, but I think he can do similar things that Jahmyr Gibbs does. Not to that necessarily. I'm not saying he's Jahmyr Gibbs, but he can be utilized a lot of the same ways. And Hampton's a different. I could see Hampton being like a Jonathan Taylor type, like mostly running, but not a lot of receiving work, but will be the bell cow for a team.
Yeah, for sure. And I could get on board with that. And certainly the higher the draft capital, the higher these players go up. Brandon, when you think about, how this is more of a dynasty philosophy question. How differently do you think about these players after the draft? And when we get to find out what their actual NFL draft capital is? For me, back in the day, I used to think like my pre-draft is my pre-draft. This is how I think about these guys. And I feel like I've adjusted over the years. Like I have to incorporate how the NFL and specifically these teams value him, because I think that changes the way I think about these players. How much? I don't know. It varies from player to player. But for you, how much does NFL draft capital factor into how you think about these players after the draft is over?
Yeah, I think that's one thing. I obviously, when you make a you watch film or do the analytics, do whatever, your process is, you have to stand firm in what you believe in, because even though these teams pick these players at a certain point, you never really know. I like to say one thing, Jaylen Warren, I loved him coming out of Oklahoma State. I had him as the 5th running back in that draft class. He didn't get drafted. He's turned into be, a pretty good player, but that draft capital obviously is a big thing. I will say that before it was kind of, you wanted, especially a running back in the first 3 rounds. But now that running back has kind of been pushed down a little bit, as we saw with Bucky Irving last year, I think in round 4, 5, 6, even 7, you can find some of those players. Obviously, I think if they don't get the draft capital, then you have to look at the situation. Is there, a couple running backs that are going to be ahead of them? In last year, Rachaad White had a good year, but was a little inefficient. So there was room for Bucky Irving to come in there, and midway through the season he did. So I think if you don't get the draft capital, you have to look at the situation on the depth chart. Yeah,
I think that's important. Like, maybe it's more important to bump up the guys who get drafted earlier. And that's more important than penalizing the guys who didn't get drafted as high as we thought. Being true to our pre-draft analysis, being true to our evaluation of these players prior to the NFL. And I think it still factors in. But once you see one team like, okay, hey, we clearly believe in this guy, and it was more than I believed in this guy, now I got to start believing in this guy a little bit more. I think that's more important. We're getting to the point of the year, 2 weeks before the NFL draft, Brandon, where I'm kind of like, I'm scraping the sides of the barrel. I'm scraping the bottom of the barrel. I'm like, God, who have we not talked about, right? Who have we not talked about on this show that I think it's important to bring up as we move forward here in our pre-draft evaluation? Washington State wide receiver Kyle Williams is coming in to Tennessee, to Nashville, to visit with the Titans. And what's interesting about this is Tennessee has the number 1 pick. I wouldn't say the cupboard is bare in the wide receiver room for the Titans right now, but it's not great. Kyle Williams as an early second-round pick to be paired with Cam Ward and go along with Calvin Ridley, I think it'd be very interesting. Let's take that out of the equation for a second, not knowing where he's going to be drafted. What can you tell us about Kyle Williams? Because this is a player that I feel like a lot of people aren't talking about out there, and yet he's going to be going probably in the second round of the NFL draft 2 weeks from now.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I didn't watch a ton of him, but I know, I know a lot of really, smart people that have been saying that they really like him. And, he did very well out, at Washington State. Obviously, it's not great for them that the Pac-12 dissolved. So a lot of those games probably aren't watched. Even when the Pac-12 was a thing, it was pretty much USC and Oregon, and everyone else didn't necessarily get, but he's a very smooth runner, good route runner. And I don't know. I know some people are kind of down on this wide receiver class. I don't think the top end's elite, but I think this wide receiver class is super deep. And that's why it's hard. It's hard for me because I think at the beginning of the second to the beginning of the third, there's a lot of similar players. So I guess it really depends on, how much you like a player and everything.
Former six-figure winner in the FFPC, Cullen Hoffman, chiming in, and this is something I was going to bring up. Kyle Williams played with Cam Ward at Washington State before Cam Ward transferred to the U in Miami. Titans offensive coordinator Nick Holtz was also the OC at UNLV in 2022 when Kyle Williams was a running rebel, as it were. Although I think they're just the rebels for football. They're the running rebels for basketball. I had a UNLV guy tell me this. He's like, no. When you're talking football, they're just the rebels. But when it's basketball, they're the running rebels. Okay, I'm sorry. Kyle Williams at Washington State, 13th in yards after catch per reception in 2024. 1,200 yards, 14 touchdowns for Washington State. He's 22 years old. And honestly, I don't want to get into the whole like, hey, what happens if he lands here? Because these things can go awry pretty quick. But if he does land in Tennessee, there is a non-zero chance that he is their number 1 by the end of the year and maybe the number 1 going forward, especially if they invest that kind of draft capital in him where he is just 1 pick away from being the top for being a first-round pick. So that's something that we'll be following. Kyle Williams, a very interesting, intriguing prospect that we've given short shrift on this show. I have 2 more shows prior to the NFL draft. We'll try to make up for it with some more Kyle Williams conversation. Let's get in. We have so much is going to be tonight on the show. It's going to be about rookies. I do want to get into some veterans that have also fallen by the wayside. It's hard to believe a 2-hour show. I can't talk about everybody I want to talk about, but we're going to get into some of the veterans here tonight, Brandon, that I have not been able to bring up over the course of the last few weeks, including after they signed with their new teams in free agency. And the guy that's going to lead this off tonight is Joshua Palmer, who is leaving Los Angeles for Buffalo. 3 years, $36 million, $18 million guaranteed. And obviously he is going to be, I don't know the number 1 wide receiver, but definitely a huge part of this Bills passing offense. Mac Hollins is gone. I don't want to say Palmer is the Hollins replacement, but obviously a lot of the targets that Hollins got are going to go to Palmer. Mac Hollins did have the second most receptions on the outside of any Bills receiver last season. That was just under 300. He was only on a 1-year deal. Palmer, 2 years ago, 70-plus catches, just under 800 yards and 3 touchdowns. Had a knee injury in 2023 that really sapped a lot of his production. He played in 6 games that year, 15 games last season, and now he gets Joe Brady. He gets Josh Allen in Buffalo. I guess this is the question here. Do the Bills have a new number 1 receiver for Josh Allen in Joshua Palmer?
It's funny you say that because when he signed on X, I put out a tweet. I said, Bill's new number 1 receiver, which I think at least for now he will be. I know on the sheets we're talking about Keon Coleman possibly later, but he's still developmental, so this could make him the other outside guy sometimes. And I've always really liked Palmer. I think he's underrated. He's dealt with some bad injuries, and obviously he was playing behind Keenan Allen. Whenever there was injuries, which there were always injuries with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, when Josh Palmer got the chance, he always played very well. He's a good deep threat. I think he can kind of take up for what they were missing with Gabe Davis when he left last year. Even though Gabe Davis was horrible last year for the Jaguars, but he did serve a better role for the Bills. But I think, I know he's had Herbert all this time, but I mean, Josh Allen, better in kind of those scramble drills, kind of get Palmer down the field. So I think he could really be really big for them. I know they just, gave Khalil Shakir a deal too, but he kind of plays the more short intermediate route. So I think Palmer will give them that ability to go deep that they've kind of been missing in the last year and a half when the Stephon Diggs kind of had that, downgrade in getting deep with the Bills.
He's certainly an interesting guy to think about as far as, because, obviously, well, like I said, rookie conversation is dominating right now. But if we were to look at the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament with the FFPC over the last week, and shout out to Fantasy Mojo, fantasymojo.com. If you play in the FFPC, highly recommend you get a subscription to Fantasy Mojo. It is invaluable content. And anytime I cite ADP on this show with the FFPC, it's always due to the Fantasy Mojo stats I have. Joshua Palmer coming in at wide receiver 73 at the 1708 on average in that best ball tournament. Brandon, I'm going to tell you this right now. If I can get a wide receiver one at that level for redraft in the 17th round for a Bills offense that, it has a good team, has an MVP quarterback, that seems like really, really good value. I'd be hammering Josh Palmer in the 17th round every time.
Oh, yeah, I think that's a no-brainer. I think that, he's getting way undervalued there. So, yeah, definitely.
Let's talk about the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team near and dear to you. Or at least near. I don't know how dear they are, but we'll find out in a little bit. James Gladstone, the brand new GM, fresh out of high school, I believe, is now the GM for the Jaguars. He says Dyami Brown has, quote, untapped potential. This is something that he said last week. 1 year, $10 million deal for Dyami Brown in free agency as he moves from the nation's capital to the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is probably going to be the Robin to the Brian Thomas Batman in this offense right now. Gladstone said, quote, somebody else that can go down the field so Thomas is not always having to be the guy on the top shelf. His most productive string of games as an NFL player for Brown was last December and January for the Commanders. Liam Cohen, the new head coach in Jacksonville, said Brown is, quote, somebody that's able to attack the field at all three levels. He's going to be turning 26 this season. He should be the team's number 2 target since Christian Kirk is in Houston. Evan Engram is in Denver. What is the scuttlebutt? What are people saying in Jacksonville, Brandon, about Dyami Brown?
So I think there's a lot of excitement with the new GM and Cohen coming in. I don't think, well, I know the city of Jacksonville wasn't overly thrilled with the free agency because they weren't spending the money bringing in the big names, but we've done that and it hasn't worked. I actually like what they did, and I think Dyami Brown, he could play a similar role to Jalen McMillan late in the season last year with the Buccaneers, similar size. And also Dyami Brown, I looked, he had 7.3 yards after catch last year. And if you look at receivers with 50 or more targets last year, that's 6. So he did very well in obviously a small, not a huge role, probably bigger in Jacksonville. But, I think he'll be there this year. The rumor is we'll draft a wide receiver probably in the first 3 rounds. So it'd kind of be like someone could possibly take over for Dyami Brown in 2 years. Or if he does well, then you could have even more depth. But I think that's the thinking there. And, some people go crazy about the $10 million. I mean, in the way wide receivers are getting paid right now, it's really not that bad.
It's a bargain. It's a bargain, and it's only 1 year, right? So if Brown is doesn't live up to it, they can easily cut bait, and then whoever they pick, to your point, if it's a receiver in the first round, probably not in the first round, but definitely Friday, they'd be looking both in the second and third round. You already mentioned it, Brandon, how deep this wide receiver class is. They could add somebody there who could be the new wide receiver 2 in Jacksonville next to Brian Thomas for, the next 4 years or what have you. So I think that's interesting to point out. Now, I feel like I think since Ezekiel Elliott got drafted by Dallas, which seems like 100 years ago, and quite frankly, it could have been. The Dallas running back situation is something we have always followed for fantasy football over the last decade or so. The Cowboys let Rico Dowdle go to the Panthers. They signed Miles Sanders from the Panthers, and they also signed one Javonte Williams to a 1-year deal. It was $3 million, not a lot of money. Saad Yousuf, who covers the Cowboys for The Athletic, said that they are, quote, still searching for their lead running back this season. The Cowboys pick at 12. They may or may not have an opportunity for Ashton Jeanty. They probably will have an opportunity for Amari Hampton. They could also draft somebody else at 12 and then pick a running back early in the second round. TreVeyon Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, Kaleb Johnson, all possibilities there. The offensive line with Dallas has always been awesome, Brandon. I feel like now it's no longer a strength of the team. They really need to address that. CeeDee Lamb cannot catch every pass. They probably have to look at perimeter receiver here. My question to you is, how much value is there in drafting Javonte Williams late right now? How much value is there in drafting Miles Sanders late right now? Specifically with Javonte Williams in the Never Too Early Best Ball tournament, he's not going until the 12th round as running back 42, even though technically right now he is the starter there. Is there any value in these guys, both with redraft and dynasty, or are you washing your hands of all Cowboys running backs that are currently on the roster, waiting to see what they do on day 1 or day 2? Something we thought that they were going to do last year and quite frankly the year before, and they didn't, maybe to their own detriment. They have to make it happen this year, I would think, but maybe not necessarily true. And if they don't make it happen again, Javonte Williams looks like a nice little buy low here in Dynasty. Your thoughts on J. Will?
Yeah, out of the two, I would much rather Javonte Williams. I've always been a big fan of him. I don't really understand what Denver was doing last year. There was a game, I think it was game 10. He had 9 carries for 59 yards and a touchdown. And after that, something happened and he fell out of favor. He's a good receiver. He has had 3 out of 4 seasons with 43 receptions or more. He's another year away from that injury. And I think he could do really well. And, in terms of the Cowboys drafting a running back, I mean, all they had was Rico Dowdle last year and they still didn't draft a running back. So, I don't think it's a done deal that even if Jeanty is there, they're going to draft, because you said the offensive line's not as good. I kind of think they might feel like, if that's healthy, hey, we got to get another receiver because we're going to have to score a bunch. Because they have Ferguson, they have Lamb. They have some guys like Jalen Tolbert's okay, I mean, he's probably a better third receiver. Turpin, electric, but I mean, he's kind of, a guy that you just throw out there, a couple passes. So I just don't know if they value running back that high. I don't know if it's because they put everything in Zeke back in the day and it kind of burnt them a little bit later on, since they didn't take advantage of it early. But I don't know if it's a done deal if either of those running backs we're talking about are there in the first or second round, that they're going to go that route.
I could easily see the Cowboys taking offensive line in the first round. I could see them maybe targeting, you think about the second round pick, maybe that's going to be Elijah Arroyo. Maybe it's going to be Mason Taylor. Maybe it's going to be Harold Fannin. Probably won't be Fannin, but you never know. And then all of a sudden you've bolstered your offensive line. You have a new tight end that could be the preferred option long-term to Ferguson. And now all of a sudden you don't have a running back, and now it's round 3. So if you're picking a running back in round 3, does that automatically make him like, oh, he's the man? He's going to be the guy that you want for fantasy in Dallas? I don't know. First round, yes. Second round, probably. Third round, more of a coin flip. And I think that's where it gets confusing here to see what Dallas does if they don't take a running back with the first 2 rounds, because Javonte Williams obviously becomes a lot more intriguing, not necessarily because of what we think of him, but clearly what Dallas thinks of him compared to the rookie class. Anyway, that's something that will evolve over the next couple of weeks. Brandon, I'm here in Northeast Wisconsin, Packers fan, cover the Packers locally for my local radio station here. And I have been pretty. I don't really like bang the drum or plant my flag on a whole lot of things, but this I was pretty sure of, and I'm starting to back off of it a little bit. When Christian Watson tore his ACL week 18 against the Bears, I was convinced that this dude is not going to play at all in the 2025 season. Maybe that was an overreaction on my part. It probably was. Brian Gutekunst was speaking to the media at the scouting combine, and he expects Watson to be back around the midpoint of the 2025 season. Now, a couple of things to unpack here. GMs, head coaches, they rarely give timetables for players coming off injury, because if they don't meet that timetable, that looks bad on the player, it looks bad on the GM, it looks bad on the head coach. They don't like to set these timelines unless they feel strongly about it. Gutekunst, who would rather chew off his right arm than give any tangible information to the media, offered this up. So I'm starting to back off. Like, you know what? I don't know about midway, but maybe November, December, whatever. And he comes back late in the season, maybe for a playoff push. Apparently, he's already had surgery, which is good. I mean, he tore his ACL in week 18. And Gutekunst said everything so far has been really good. He's been through this before, so he knows what to expect. It's a big injury. It may take some time, but he's got the right mindset, positive attitude to it. Now, my question here is this. Watson, maybe for me, he's not a buy low in Dynasty. I never really liked him from a fantasy perspective ever since he's been in the league. I think it's really intriguing to think about Jayden Reed as a buy low right now, who is coming off a season in which the second half of the year he was non-existent. Dontavian Wicks, who seemingly covered his hands in Crisco every game this past season.
I was just about to say.
It was awful watching him. I mean, just dropping everything. It was so unfortunate. And then you have Romeo Doubs, who obviously is coming into a contract year as well. I think that the Packers believe if they have to do it with those three guys, they can do it with those three guys. I happen to think round 2, probably, round 3, maybe, round 1, for sure not. They're going to take a receiver in the NFL draft. If you could talk about how you think about all these Packers receivers from a dynasty perspective, as far as Watson, Doubs, Reed, Wicks, and then what you think they're going to do on Friday, I believe it's going to be a receiver. How do you view what the Packers are going to do here with their receivers for the 2025 season?
Yeah, I just want to briefly talk about Christian Watson. You know, he had that big end of his rookie year, and I just didn't necessarily believe it. He had a lot of big plays. Obviously, he has, he's always, we saw that his rookie year. He's had some issues catching the ball. He obviously has all the hamstring injuries, so I don't know on top of this. And then Jayden Reed, I love Jayden Reed coming out of college. I still don't think they use him right. I think they use him like he's, only a short yardage, kind of after catch guy. He can run routes and everything. I think they need to establish that. I think Doubs, I liked him coming out in Nevada. I think he's better than I thought he would be. So I think the thing is with the Packers, if they're going to draft another receiver, they have a bunch of like 2 and 3 receivers, like the second or third receivers on teams. So if they're not going to pick a number 1, then I don't really know if that is really helping. I think Wicks is probably a wide receiver 4, even though before last year, everyone was hyping him up. And I was like, there's a reason that he didn't get drafted as high because, that's, I think, another thing. A lot of people see highlights in camp or like in preseason games, and they don't necessarily follow, the players in college and everything. So they don't see, it's kind of the Joe Milton effect. Everyone saw that one game against the Bills back up. But I mean, hey, who knows? He might turn into something. But I mean, when someone doesn't do that in like 3 years of chances in college, I just think sometimes you just got to take them for what they are and just not a consistent player.
I'm still team Wicks. And the reason why is, and maybe this is bad analysis on my part, but I just think about everything that went on with him. He had the really, really good junior season, probably could have come into the draft and been maybe a second round pick. I don't know about a first round pick, but maybe a second round pick. He stays for another year. And then that year, Virginia gets a new head coach, new OC, new quarterback, new offense. He deals with injuries that year, and boom, he's a 5th round pick after that. So I see it there. And this is probably my Packer fandom coming through. Dude, I remember when everybody in Green Bay said Davante Adams was this massive bust because he couldn't catch anything, couldn't catch a cold, was dropping passes like it was a bodily function. And then lo and behold, he becomes one of the best receivers in Packers history. He's still churning along in his early 30s. I'm not saying Wicks is Adams. They don't have near the same draft capital. They don't have near the same performance in their first couple years in the league. But I think I was stung by my Adams analysis, thinking like, hey, this is a guy they need to move on from. And I'm willing to give Wicks one more year cautiously because, to your point, he did not have the college-level production that Adams had. But I see some similarities between the two. I think you are probably right. I think he's probably just a wide receiver 3, wide receiver 4 on his own team, and that's probably what's going to happen. I still remain optimistic. False optimism, I've been accused of that before. Maybe I'm doing it the same thing here.
Well, I will say, though,
go ahead.
One last thing. I will say that all those Packer receivers, I think, on that team are better football players than they will be fantasy assets.
Yeah.
Other than Jayden Reed, I think he has the best chance of being something. But all the guys, I think, as a whole, they make a pretty good offense. It's just like fantasy-wise, it's never going to be like a consistent, like 100 yards touchdown games, every week. I could see a different receiver doing it every week, which is good as a Packers fan. But as a fantasy player, that's really hard to figure out who's going to do what each week.
Hashtag better in best ball. And we haven't even mentioned Tucker Kraft. We haven't mentioned Luke Musgrave, Josh Jacobs, and the Packers' huge concentration and focus on the running game in the 2024 season. That might continue in 2025. Go with God. Draft at your own risk. Packers receivers this year. Okay, let's move on and go out to the West Coast. Let's talk about Las Vegas. The Raiders have signed Geno Smith to a 2-year, $85.5 million contract extension after they acquired him from the Seahawks. This is a player who's going to move on from DK Metcalf, Jackson Smith-Njigba, Tyler Lockett, to throwing passes to Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers, and not a whole lot else there. Your thoughts on Geno Smith in Dynasty Superflex right now, if we can frame it that way here, Brandon? I think that he is a massive upgrade for the Raiders as far as the quarterback position goes, but that was such a low bar to jump over. And he doesn't have the weapons that he did in Seattle. Now, Las Vegas has some premium picks here. They could easily go running back with Jeanty in the first round. They could go wide receiver in the second round. And all of a sudden, this Raiders offense looks better, a lot better. And the playmakers around Smith would obviously make Smith's ADP go up, Smith's dynasty value go up. How are you viewing Geno Smith 2 weeks before the draft right now? Is this a guy that you're trying to acquire because you think his value is going to go up? Or are you kind of bearish on his prospects, knowing that he had a lot more talent in Seattle than what he has at the moment in Las Vegas?
Yeah, definitely a lot more talent. As someone that has had to roll with Geno the last couple of years in Superflex, as my second quarterback, it's been fine. I think the big year he had in Seattle a couple of years ago, I think that might have been a one-time thing. So I think he's an above-average quarterback, but like you said, they have below-average receivers. I mean, Brock Bowers is going to get a lot, but Geno's never, in Seattle, he didn't throw the tight end a ton, obviously because he had the receivers. So we'll see that, but I'm actually confused on what the Raiders are doing, because at first you thought they were kind of going through a rebuild, but then they bring in Pete Carroll, and now they bring in Geno, and it's kind of like, what are you? I don't know what they're trying. I don't know what they're trying to do. So I guess they gave him this big contract. So at least for 2 years. But they're going to. Under Pete Carroll, they always tried to run the ball. So you would think that might help him. More play action and everything. But I just don't think the volume is necessarily there. But he probably has a decent floor if you're just looking for a quarterback to get you some points and not necessarily give you negatives. Because one of the things I don't love about Geno is I think he's afraid to throw interceptions. Yeah. So he takes I think that was the thing with DK, because sometimes you just got to throw it up to those receivers, those big receivers, and he's not willing to do that because he doesn't want to throw interceptions. That's kind of like what kept him the job for a while, but it kind of limits the offense if you're not willing to throw those balls in there to those premier receivers. I think,
and I was talking, I wasn't talking, I was listening to, I think it was Chad Ryder from NFL.com. It was Chad Ryder. He was on Sigmund Bloom's On the Couch podcast with Football Guys. And he was talking about how, when you get to this level, the best football players in the world, you have to take certain risks to kind of separate yourself from everybody else. He mentioned how the Chiefs have done this in drafts, where they're taking risks, whether it's character, whether it's, what have you, where other teams are saying, they're saying no, you have to say yes. And it's worked out for the Chiefs. It has not worked out for the Chiefs. That was the team he brought up. I think similar to that, with the way you play football, Geno Smith has to take some risks, right? You're talking about the elite of the elite. And yeah, every so often you're going to get burned by throwing downfield. But if you never take advantage of that weapon, that can be a field flipper, that can be a game changer, that is a playmaker. If you don't take advantage of that, you're hurting the team. You're hurting your team's prospects, and you're doing your teammates a disservice by not doing that. Hopefully, he can take advantage of that if they get a lid lifter in the draft. Brock Bowers, obviously, you don't want him double teamed every single play. Right. And Jacoby Myers, I don't know if that's enough to take the pressure off Bowers. Certainly wasn't last year. People were focusing on Bowers the whole time. Of course, he had one of the greatest tight end seasons ever. So maybe he is just superhuman. I don't know. Fun things to think about going into the NFL draft. Kenneth Gainwell, we talked about him earlier. I want to talk about him again. 1-year deal. He moves from Philadelphia to Western Pennsylvania to be a Steelers running back here. Mike DeFabo from The Athletic has said he still thinks the Steelers are going to be targeting a running back in the 2025 draft. Now, after the signing of Gainwell, Mike Tomlin talked about how Gainwell has a well-rounded game, how he could play special teams. Yeah, that's what we want to hear as fantasy owners who have Gainwell on our dynasty teams. And plays a lot of on possession down ball. Okay, that's fine. But Tomlin also said this is a super deep, I'm paraphrasing, this is a super deep year at running back. I think the way that we have to handle Kenneth Gainwell, that we have to handle Jaylen Warren, we cannot treat them in drafts or in dynasty right now as the number one running back, as the number two running back. I don't know what the contract situation is like, but I think right now there's a non-zero chance that Gainwell doesn't make the team. If the Steelers could go running back in this, I mean, not for the first two rounds, but what happens if they draft two running backs? Then you have two running backs and Jaylen Warren, and Kenneth Gainwell is kind of the odd man out. I don't know if that'll happen, but in a draft as deep as this, man, that Pittsburgh backfield right now, Brandon, that's one of the most volatile situations in dynasty fantasy football at the moment. Jaylen Warren looking really good right now. He could look awful for his dynasty value 2 weeks from today.
No, I definitely agree. And I always get confused when teams get similar backs. I mean, obviously they're not, I think Jaylen Warren's like more physical between the tackles, but I mean, they're both, the thing with Warren and Najee was, you had the bruiser and you had Warren that was a little more of a slasher. Well, Gainwell's it just confused. Same thing with what the Titans did last year. But I looked at, I'm a huge Kenny Gainwell fan when he got drafted through the draft process. I don't think the Eagles ever used him well. They used him like he was just a regular running back. But when he got double-digit carries, there's 10 games. He had 104 carries for 472 yards, averaging 4.5 a carry. So a lot of people want to put him as this like kind of scat, back, but he can run between the tackles. Obviously, I don't want him to be running between the tackles 20 times. In Philadelphia last year, he had only one target over 9 yards. This is a player at Memphis that you could line him up out wide. He can run wide receiver routes. I've never understood why they didn't, so I think the Steelers could, if Roman Wilson still doesn't work out and they don't get another wide receiver, they could play Gainwell in the slot some, move him around and everything. So that is a positive for him. But I do agree with you. The running back situation is not great. They're confidence-wise, because you have to figure if it came down to it, if they draft a running back in the top 3 rounds, it'd be that running back, Jaylen Warren, and then Gainwell. And if they draft another one, Gainwell might be, like you said, a special teamer, kind of stuff like that, which I was happy when he finally got out of Philadelphia. I was like, he's going to go somewhere where he can get some playing time. And now I'm like, he might be in the same exact position
exactly.
he was before.
And this new head coach is talking about what a great special teamer he is. So frustrating. And it's not like he got the bag. He did not get the bag.
Yeah.
I mean, he got some money, but I think that, well, let me put you on the spot here, Brandon. If we were to look at all the running back situations in the NFL, when you consider draft capital for where these teams are picking, when you consider the players they already have on the team in the running back room, would you say, when you're watching this draft in 2 weeks, would you say that the Pittsburgh running back situation is the one that you think is the most exciting? Would you say the Dallas one is the one you're more focused on? In other words, what running back situation has the quickest path to greatness? Which one could be an instant upgrade for that player in our rookie dynasty drafts this season if he gets significant draft capital? Dallas and Pittsburgh are right up there. Am I forgetting anybody? Who would you put as the top one you're watching?
Yeah, I think those would both be pretty good. I mean, I want to know who's going to be the quarterback in Pittsburgh too, because I think that puts a lot of, in there, because that might be more running and everything. My only worry is if Pittsburgh or Dallas don't get someone in the first and second round, like we were talking, and they get someone third round or later, that could just be a 3-back committee, and that's like even worse for fantasy managers. So it's almost like you want them to get one of the top guys, or like just wait. Because if they get someone in the middle, like it could just be a disaster running back by committee in those situations.
So one of the other things I wanted to bring up in this first segment, we obviously, one of the big things we do at the FFPC every year is the pros versus Joes, where we have 36 industry pros take on 36 FFPC Joes in all these best ball drafts, and they're all battling for 6 different FFPC main event entries. I want to say like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago, we started doing pros versus Joes at the FFPC, but we did it at a dynasty level. And I don't even know how many of those leagues we have out there now, but we got a bunch. Dynasty League Football has at least one. And Brandon, I know you at least co-manage one. Are you the only guy running this Dynasty League Football team for the FFPC? Or do you have a co-manager for this?
No, it's just myself.
Just you. Okay. Which is great. Because I have highlighted, I don't even know if you know this. I send out all the FFPC emails every week, and I have highlighted several times your coverage of how you've been handling this team and the results of how this team has gone. Now, refresh my memory. When you ran this team last year, how deep into the playoffs did it get?
I lost in the first round.
First round. Okay. Now you have posted a new article, which you can find, dynastyleaguefootball.com, by Brandon Haye, about roster cutdown day, which is always a huge thing in the FFPC dynasty streets every single year. This is difficult. And because with the FFPC, we have short benches when it comes down to this. You have to cut down to 16 players, which is not easy to do, especially if you've been able to curate a deep team, which in my opinion, you did. And you had to make some tough cuts. Can you walk us through the process of how you made these cuts and who these players that you parted with that ultimately just did not figure into the near future or the distant future on this squad?
Yeah, so when I did the article, I kind of put some notable players that were cut by other teams. And I think other teams had some tougher decisions. One player that it hurt me to do, but it was something I had to do, was I ended up cutting Sam Howell. I've been a big Sam Howell fan ever since he was at North Carolina. I thought I was totally wrong on this, and I'm one. I'm an analyst that will always own up to my mistakes. And I thought Sam Howell might get that job by mid-year last year, but that one game he came in, he looked horrible. Yeah. And I was like, they brought in Sam Darnold. You got to think they're going to bring in someone else, a rookie. I was like, if he makes something out of it, then it is what it is. So I had to let go of him. Do you actually have the list right now? I'm kind of going blank on it.
Yeah, no, I can bring it up. I have it in front of me right now. So basically, so you had mentioned Sam Howell. This is something that, because one of the private dynasty leagues I play in, we don't have cut downs for another couple of weeks. But Deontay Johnson, I'm probably going to be parting ways with.
Yes, Deontay. When I drafted him, I thought I got a steal.
Yes.
I thought I was all in on Deontay Johnson. I did in the Scott Fish Bowl. I went all in on Deontay Johnson and Bryce Young. That really blew up in my face. I honestly don't know if he plays anymore, because
that's my fear as well. That's exactly my fear as well.
He was on 2 playoff teams, and they're just like, no, we're good. Like Houston barely could field a wide receiving group, and they're like, nope, we're good. So I don't know what happened to, like, what's behind the scenes, but he's a guy that I'm like, I believe in the talent, but I
I think the other thing too to bring up, and I think this is a Marshawn Lynch quote. You want to make sure your mentals is good, and I don't know if the mentals is good with Diontae Johnson right now. I hope they are, but certainly the reporting we've seen on that doesn't give me much hope. The other okay, so Abanikanda, we don't have to talk about him, but I will say I'm with you on Abanikanda. As I like this guy coming out of Pittsburgh. I thought he was just needed the opportunity, but again, short benches, limited time. You can only wait so long. The other notable cuts you brought up, I don't have to bring up everybody here, but the top three: Christian Watson, who we've already talked about, Elijah Mitchell, which I think is interesting, and then Jalen Polk. Let's talk about Mitchell here for a second. A lot of people were very excited when Kansas City signed him, but I'm telling you, man, I could totally see Kansas City taking a running back in round 2, maybe a running back in round 5, and then how does Elijah Mitchell fit into your dynasty team? Because at that point, it's just nothing. I think if I had Mitchell on any of my dynasty teams right now, I'm trying to flip him for a third, maybe a second if I can get for him, if I can get the right person believing him. But I think you're right to cut Mitchell. If you couldn't get anything for him, I just don't see a future for him in Kansas City, because I think the Chiefs are taking a running back and maybe 2.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I believe they brought back Kareem Hunt, and then you have Pacheco still there, And yeah, like you said, I think what you're hoping for is maybe in camp, he gets a lot of hype, and then you can deal him there, or maybe early preseason game, he has a couple long runs, you could get a trade there. But I'm totally with you. He's one of those players where you want to try to get as much as you can for them. Kind of what happened with me with Dameon Pierce when he was having that big year in Houston. I was like, I just don't know if this is sustainable. They're probably going to bring in someone else. So sometimes, even if you really believe in a player, if you can get the right amount of value, it's always smart to do that in Dynasty.
I'll bring up Jalen Polk here. I was not a fan of him coming into the league, but I did draft him in a couple of spots where apparently I played in leagues where everybody hated Jalen Polk. So I'm like, all right, I'll take a chance on him here at this point. Did you like him? I was lukewarm at best on Jalen Polk, and now you released him off this team as well.
Yeah, I wasn't very high on him. I actually like Jalen McMillan better.
Yeah, me too.
Later,
yes,
and I like Baker better for the Patriots. Hopefully, with the new coaching staff. Who knows what was going on in New England last year? It seems like it was kind of a mess. So see how they really do that. But yeah, and they have a couple other young receivers that aren't like Douglas and Boutte and everything. But they'll probably bring in a receiver. But yeah, it's kind of the worst version of the Packers. Like a bunch of guys, but they're not even like as productive,
Right.
So it's just a bunch of guys that you just don't know. So that's why I was kind of, made that decision.
I want to bring – that was an article, by the way. You can check that out at dynastyleaguefootball.com. Brandon has his full report on there as well. If you go to that article, you can also see some players that he's going to be looking at that go after round 1 in his Dynasty rookie draft as well. I won't reveal those. We may or may not talk about some of them throughout the show tonight. The other thing that you had published, this is probably, I don't know, a month and a half or so ago, and I think it's still relevant. 5 sleepers that are not rookies in dynasty leagues that you want to add before the start of the 2025 NFL draft. I don't know if you have this article in front of you. I know you do a lot of work. Do you remember having this piece published for DLF?
I do remember the piece. I do not remember which 5 players.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Because I don't want to give them all away here. But I'll bring up a couple of them here. Number 1, Roschon Johnson was on this list for the Bears. And obviously we could see the Bears add a running back, maybe Jeanty. I don't know. DeAndre Swift is still there, but we know that Ben Johnson, when he was with Detroit got rid of DeAndre Swift. So I don't know how married they are to him, which might open the door for Roschon Johnson here. Yeah,
definitely. I kind of, even if they do want to utilize Swift, I mean, in Detroit, they use the 2-back system, and I saw Roschon Johnson being the David Montgomery type. They gave, even though Ben Johnson wasn't there, Roschon Johnson got a lot of the short yardage work. So that was my thinking too. Say he even gets, say a 30%, of the carries, but gets like goal line carries. so maybe he gets a touchdown every other game or something like that. Very productive, and we're hoping that Ben Johnson can, there's all these weapons on the Bears that he'll make this offense more productive. If they move the ball more, red zone opportunities, more opportunities for Roschon Johnson. So that was kind of my thinking there, because especially with running back, it's really hard because most dynasty leagues are fairly deep, and you're going to keep the first two running backs. So you're kind of looking at a lower end running back that maybe people have given up on, that you want to really try to find before we know what happens in the draft. Like if the Bears don't draft a running back, obviously Roschon Johnson's way higher. Value is way higher. So try to work a deal before his value goes up.
It's going to be fascinating. I'm going to be at the draft in Green Bay 2 weeks from now. And that Friday night, I'm telling you, if there's anybody watching that draft, well, there's going to be plenty of people watching that draft that have skin in the game for Dynasty. Brandon, everybody's watching that with a pucker, because they know that their veteran running back that they have on their Dynasty team could see his value just poof based on how teams handle day 2 draft capital with running backs. I'm not going to give away the other 4 names on here. I don't want to say I brought up the most boring name in Roschon Johnson, but there are 4 other very interesting names on this list. And if you want to check that out, check it out at dynastyleaguefootball.com. Brandon's piece on the 5 veterans you want to add before the 2025 NFL draft. Mile High Luke with a great question here about 2 sophomore running backs, how we feel about that. I'm going to make you wait, Luke, because we have to take a break. When we come back, we're going to answer Luke's question. We're also going to be talking about the running backs. This is mostly a running back segment coming up. Again, running backs that we haven't talked a whole lot about, including, but not limited to, DJ Giddens, Taj Brooks, Woody Marks we'll get into, Cam Skattebo, which is, God, we could do a whole podcast every week on Cam Skattebo. So that and so much more. Don't go anywhere. You're watching the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show, brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman. He's Brandon Haye from Dynasty League Football. Stick around. We're coming back right after this.
What's up, guys? Andrew Cooper here of Fantasy Alarm. And for me, the football season never sleeps. It doesn't. I don't care if the Super Bowl's over. I'm still rocking and rolling. And the best way to do that is with Dynasty Fantasy Football, because you can play all year round and you can get started right now. You can go in and play 2 different ways at myffpc.com. You can do a startup draft where you can go in and draft all the players from scratch and load up on rookie picks, especially if you like this rookie class. You want, Cam Ward or Ted McMillan. You can load up on those picks, get all those players, lock them in for the rest of their careers. Or you can go over and play a different way. You can pick up an orphan team. Sometimes people decide they don't want to play. FFPC will never fold those leagues. They just put those teams back up. And you can bid on them, you can pick them up and take over those teams, right? You check out what kind of picks they have, what kind of players they have. Sometimes you can even get a discount. Just make sure it's a team you like, grab them, and you're off and running. And then you're ready for this draft when it comes around at the end of April here. MyFFPC.com. If you've never played, use promo code ALARM. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more for your first time. And you can go get set up. You can do a startup. You can pick up an orphan team. You can start playing Dynasty right now, the game that never sleeps, the game that goes all year round.
For the first time ever in the FFPC, the Big Gorilla Tournament is live. A $1 million grand prize, $50 discount on every 3rd team that you're purchasing. The early Rampage tournament is going on right now. So basically, you are in 2 separate tournaments for 1 entry fee when you enter at myffpc.com. $1 million grand prize in one, $10,000 grand prize in the other. The early Rampage is all these teams that are drafting early. So you'll be pitted against all teams drafting now, not teams that are drafting in late August, early September, what have you. And the 7 Bananas promo is live. you want to make sure you're trying to get that, not that you can because it's randomized, but if you get that 7 pick multiple times in a row, you're going to get free teams, including but not limited to, including a jungle safari if you get 7 picks right in a row. We've already had a team get 3 picks in a row, and we have had teams get 5 picks of the same draft pick in a row before. So take your chance right now at myffpc.com. And even if you don't get that jungle safari, $1 million will buy a boatload of jungle safaris here. We are broadcasting the show, High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network with Brandon Haye from Dynasty League Football. And, of course, league winners. Check out his coverage of Central Florida there. And, Brandon, I think one of the things that we need to point out here is, like, you cover college football. You're well-versed in a lot of these rookies. You're paying attention to not only Central Florida, which is your specialty, but you're paying attention to a lot of these college prospects over the course of their careers.
Yes, I am. I've gotten pretty involved in Devy leagues the past few years, where you can draft players in college and they automatically go on your NFL team. So you don't have to worry about not having the number 1 pick and wanting to get one of the top players. So definitely, I'm very, I love college football. If it wasn't for fantasy, I definitely would not be into the NFL as much, probably because the Jaguars suck every year. So it's always a depressing type thing.
Weren't they in the AFC Championship just a few years ago, something like that?
Yeah, so they're usually good 1 out of every 7 years.
Okay, 7-year itch for the Jaguars as far as fantasy, or as far as NFL goes. Okay, I want to bring this up because Mile High Luke, Botanical Extraction, the guy with the longest name who watches us on YouTube, had a question. I'm going to recuse myself until you answer this first, Brandon. He wants to know Marshawn Lloyd versus Kamani Vidal in Dynasty right now. Lloyd, who obviously had the draft capital last year over Vidal, but who dealt with a lot of, two significant injuries, and then an appendectomy. It was something, I think it was I think he had appendicitis in the end.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah, it was rough. Rough rookie year for Lloyd. Vidal played behind Dobbins, played behind Gus Edwards. This is an interesting question. And Brandon, I want to know how you feel about it. If you had the opportunity to roster one of these guys right now in Dynasty, who would you prefer?
So I went all in on Marshawn Lloyd last year. A lot of Dynasty drafts, I picked him up because my thought was, LaFleur likes that 2 running back system.
Mm-hmm.
You got Jacobs was going to be the main running back, and then you saw they needed another running back, to kind of spare Jacobs. They played a couple of running backs that were okay. But it seems like they just have so many weapons on that offense. I don't know how many touches Lloyd can really get. Vidal, I don't think has. I guess he could have an upside. And even though they got Najee, second year, usually sometimes running backs, it takes them a couple of years to get going. Harbaugh kind of likes to run the ball. He could have some, So personally, I would take Lloyd because of the receiving ability. But like you said, he's suffered injuries all through his college career. He had injuries last year. So I wouldn't mind if you went the other way. But personally, I go with Lloyd.
I'm going to agree with you. And here's why. I wouldn't say I was all in with Lloyd, but Theo Greminger from Fantasy Points just had me, even before the Packers drafted him, he was all in on Marshawn Lloyd. And I started to be a believer in him as well. To your point of what you said of how the Packers like to operate on their offense, I knew it was going to be a 1-2 punch, and that 1-2 punch happened. It just happened to be skewed much more favorably for Jacobs, and it was Chris Brooks. It was Emmanuel Wilson. It was not Marshawn Lloyd. There are talks that the Packers would draft another running back this year, despite being set at the position with Jacobs, with Lloyd, with Brooks, with Wilson. I think back to last year when a lot of people thought receiver was a big need for Green Bay. They didn't draft any receivers. And they just rolled in with Watson and Dobbs and Reed and Wicks and all those other guys. So I don't think it's a foregone conclusion that they draft a running back. I could easily see them skipping the position, even though this is a really good year for running backs this year. I am more willing to bet on Lloyd than bet against him because of his perceived dynasty value right now. I think that normally if you try to draft a player like this, or trade for a player like this from a team who drafted him with, I don't know, high second round draft capital in your rookie draft last year, they're not willing to sell for 80 cents on the dollar or 75 cents on the dollar. I think for this guy, they probably are. And I'll bet on that. And with Vidal, who was healthy most of last season, he's still well behind Edwards. He was still well behind J.K. Dobbins, who's not going to be on the team this year. And now he's playing behind Najee Harris. I just don't see it with Vidal. So, yeah, Lloyd, swing for the fences, go for home runs. Don't go for doubles at the end of your bench. And Lloyd is the home run. Vidal is at best a double and probably just a single. Okay. Moving forward. Oh, and I'll just bring this up with Mile High Luke, who posted this in YouTube. In order for Marshawn Lloyd to be successful, he's going to have to overcome big red flags with his fumbling, which even showed up last year before they IR'd him, which was true. I don't, and Brandon, I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. I don't necessarily penalize a guy who has fumbling problems in college, who has fumbling problems early in his NFL career. I mean, it's a thing. Like, I do think about it, and Luke is right to bring it up. But I think I've seen guys get over this. Adrian Peterson, if I remember correctly, was a massive fumbler. But he got over it.
Same with Tiki Barber.
Tiki Barber is another great example. Yes, exactly. Yeah. So I think, like, for that, like, yeah, that factors into it. But if I'm thinking about all the things that are preventing Marshawn Lloyd from being a fantasy starter for me a few weeks out of the 2025 season, fumbling is like maybe number 4 or number 5 on that list. And number 1, 2, and 3, stay healthy.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, let's move on here. Ashton Jeanty. We don't talk about him a whole lot on this program because he's been the de facto 101 in Dynasty rookie drafts, Dynasty rookie superflex drafts. I mean, I've heard everybody say, no, you don't want to take a quarterback. You're still taking Jeanty there. So this begs the question to me. And I have the number 1 overall pick in one of my Dynasty leagues. What do you think about what it would take if you had the 101 in your rookie draft to part ways with that pick, knowing that Omarion Hampton could go at the 112, knowing if Omarion Hampton doesn't go at the 112, if he goes later in the first round, he might end up on a better offense. And then we got a really serious decision to make. Oh, do we take Hampton over Jeanty, who might go at 106 to a bad Raiders team? I don't know. So when you think about all that, it usually takes a Godfather type offer to get that 101 pick from anybody. And I think if Jeanty truly is a generational talent, you pretty much are turning down every trade, Brandon. So we have to ask, is Jeanty truly a generational talent at the running back position?
See, I actually had a conversation on X with someone pretty big in the space, talking about Jaguars, about the pick 5. And he said that he would take Jeanty at 5 as the Jaguars. And I said, absolutely not. There's just too many holes. And I think there's enough talent with Bigsby and ETN. Like, I think, a new coach and everything, I'm fine with them drafting a running back, kind of like the Bucs did last year, getting Bucky over in the 4th round. I'm okay, even 3rd round, but going that high. So it's hard for me because you can't deny what he did last year. I mean, it was crazy. Like, it was just his contact balance and everything was great. But a lot of people, I still really like him, but like Bijan Robinson in Atlanta, he's really good. But like I think people probably thought he was going to have bigger numbers, go into that offense consistently. So just at the running back position, sometimes it depends on the games, the team, and everything. I think let me just say, I think he's very, very good. I'm not willing to say he's generational.
Yeah, I mean, like, as far like if I was to tell you Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs are in this draft, then you can't utilize any of what they've done in the pros. You can only reference their college career. How would you rank those guys coming into the pros between Jeanty, Robinson, and Gibbs?
I'd probably go Robinson, Jeanty, Gibbs.
Okay.
So
Jeanty's up there, but he's not up there.
Right.
As it is for you.
And let me say this too. I've loved Jahmyr Gibbs because of his, receiving ability, his speed and everything. But I think Bijan and Jeanty are more fully rounded running backs, can, carry the ball 25 times consistently.
Let's do this here. Corbin wants to know what our thoughts on Colin Granger is. And I'm going to be honest with you. Of all the players I thought I was going to talk about on the show tonight, I did not think Colin Granger would be one of them. For those of you who are not educated on this, and quite frankly, that's 99% of you, God bless you, Corbin, for being a real one, for being a diehard. Colin Granger played college basketball at Coastal Carolina, and the Carolina Panthers have signed him as a 6'8", 245-pound tight end. Now, this is interesting, I think, because it's Carolina. They have Tommy Tremble there, who is an athletic freak. They have Jatavian Sanders there, who I think was kind of like a tweener wide receiver tight end. Jordan Matthews, for Christ's sake, used to be a receiver in the NFL, and now he's a tight end. And now you have Colin Granger there. Even at, listen, I work for the FFPC. I want to bring up tight ends on this show. Even in a tight end premium league, man. Brandon, I can't. This guy's not registering for me right now.
No, I mean, you would have to have the deepest of deepest benches in Dynasty to even contemplate it. And honestly, I don't want to contemplate it because I'm pretty all in on Jatavian Sanders. So I hope that doesn't happen. But because I mean, I know there have been success stories, in the past, but just it doesn't happen often.
That's the thing. It's just like unless you're in the deepest of deepest leagues or you are really punting for 2026, I just think there's better ways to spend a roster spot. And Corbin, you could be right. He says next Antonio Gates. Who am I to say you're wrong? I don't know. Maybe he will be. Maybe he'll be unbelievable. I think the odds are against him, and I don't see it happening. But there's certainly a non-zero chance of it happening. But unfortunately, that has the time has expired on what we could talk about Colin Granger tonight. Unfortunately, sorry, man. Moving on, TreVeyon Henderson. We touched on this in the first segment. He is your number 2 running back, right?
Yes.
Okay, he's your number 2 running back, and I think you would agree that this is a first-round talent that I don't want to say he's going to go in the second round. I think that it's probably, I would say there's probably a 65% shot of TreVeyon Henderson going late in the first round at this point. I thought he's going to be a second-round pick for most of drafting season. I've kind of shifted my thoughts on that. But I do think he is going to be the 3rd running back drafted, rightly or wrongly. But I do think he goes in the first round. Tell us a little bit about why you like TreVeyon Henderson better than Omarion Hampton from a talent level.
Yeah, I just think you've seen with Jahmyr Gibbs and some other, running backs come out that you give them 10, these type of backs 10 or 11 carries, and then you give them like 5 or 6 receptions. We saw in the college football playoff against Texas when TreVeyon Henderson took that screen and really changed that game in the first half, went 70 yards. He has great hands. He has speed. He actually has 2 seasons of 1,000 yards and one, I think, 900. He's actually a better runner between the tackles. He actually last year he had 4.4 yards after contact. Would you think of him more of a speedy kind of shifty back? But he does have some of that power. He has had some nagging injuries too. So I think, like Gibbs, you need someone like a Montgomery to pair with Henderson so you can kind of have that 1-2 punch. And I know this is not necessarily what you said, but if he does make it to the second round, I think some teams that should look at him are the Bengals, Browns, Broncos, Texans, and possibly even the Raiders.
I want to talk about Kalen Johnson here as we pivot off of TreVeyon Henderson. Kalen Johnson is a player that I want to keep an open mind about. Kaleb Johnson, not Kalen Johnson. I don't know what I'm thinking of here. But Kaleb Johnson is a player that I kind of made my mind up on, Brandon, that he is going to be a first and second down banger. He's not going to catch a lot of passes. He's probably going to be taken off the field on 3rd downs, and that is his fantasy upside. If he's not falling into the end zone, he's probably not a player that's going to win you a lot of leagues. To that end, is the team and the role that he inherits in the NFL more important to a player like him than it is to what you just said about Henderson, Omarion Hampton, Quinshon Judkins, Ashton Jeanty. Is the fit more important for Kaleb Johnson than it would be for some of these other running backs that are going to be drafted on Thursday and Friday?
I do think it is, and it's not even necessarily like say scheme wise or anything. I think it's the depth chart. If he can get a job where there's really not anyone really competing with, and he can get that job early. I was actually watching some videos from Dynasty Nerds, kind of breaking down Kaleb Johnson, because I know a lot of people are high on him. Obviously, a lot of production at Iowa. I'll just say they don't pass the ball well or often, so you're going to get a lot of production at Iowa. And sometimes for his size, he just didn't move the pile as much, or break tackles as much as you would like to see. He, like you kind of say, he's good. It's just like I don't know if he ever, like you said, wins you games. He could probably his floor is probably pretty good, but I mean, if you're trying to win leagues, especially in competitive ones, you need guys that you need to take that risk that can have that high upside. I just don't know if, unless, like you said, Kaleb Johnson scores 18 touchdowns.
Right.
I just don't see that happening.
Yeah, he'd have to pull off his best James Cook impression, right? And
right.
then by the way, let's just say he does that. If Kaleb Johnson scores 16, 18 touchdowns, whatever his rookie season, man, I'm flipping him for an early second round or so.
Oh yeah,
just
as quick as possible. Quick as possible.
Cam this is how I labeled it, and Matt will throw this up on the screen here. Cam Skattebo, fact or fiction? Because he is one of the more polarizing prospects. We'll get into Travis Hunter later on in the show. But I think that Cam Skattebo is one of the more polarizing prospects we've had at running back. The tape looks great, man. What he was able to do, even in that Texas game where he was going up against, one of the best and well-funded college football teams in the country. He was doing it himself. He looked awesome. He was throwing touchdowns. He was catching touchdowns. He was running for touchdowns. However, he chose not to run at the NFL Combine. And then I think he ran at his pro day. It was pedestrian at best. It wasn't great. He's not a super heavy guy. It's not like he's a rocked up 235-pound guy. He's like 215, 220 or whatever. When you think about what he's going to be in the pros, many of us will be sitting at the end of the first round in our rookie drafts or the beginning of the second round in our rookie drafts, and Cam Skattebo will be staring us in the face. Obviously, draft capital will play a role into this, but knowing what you know now about Skattebo, Brandon, how do you feel about him moving from Arizona State to the National Football League?
So he's a very interesting player. I think he might fall into those categories of really, really good college players, but I just don't know, because I looked and he had tons of yards last year, but he had 9 games where he had over 20 carries and 5 games where he had over 25 carries, to get a lot of those yards. He's one of those backs where you keep giving him the ball and he'll get better as the game goes. But I just wonder, our teams don't really do that anymore, unless you have a premier back. So if he doesn't get that, it's not like he's a game breaker all the time with that kind of speed and everything. He's probably going to be a short yardage type guy, a guy you can kind of maybe like an H-back type, throw some passes to. He's going to be a better football player than a fantasy asset, I think.
So based on your analysis, I'm guessing, Brandon, you are going to let somebody else draft him in all your rookie drafts.
Yeah, I mean, if he somehow was around, say in the 3rd round, I mean, I think at that point you got to take the chance just on his ability. And like I said, I could be totally wrong. It's just the way teams kind of use their running backs now. I just don't know if he's getting those 20 touches a game at the Nets level.
I always bring this up too, and I think I brought this up on the show before. Accumulator backs is what we always called them. Not when we were growing up, but when we were playing fantasy football 15, 20 years ago or whatever. I hated the accumulator backs that would have to get volume in order to be fantasy worthy. Give me the guys that can score 20 points on 8 touches rather than 18 touches. And I think Skattebo, to your point, and I don't know if I've heard this from anybody else. You might be the first one. I think he might be the accumulator back of, and maybe Kaleb Johnson would factor into that as well, but he might be the accumulator back of 2025, where if you're not getting 20 plus touches, you're not getting a really good starting worthy fantasy football running back. So I give you props on that. I don't know if this guy's an accumulator. I think it's within the realm of possibility. Damien Martinez is a player. We talk about fit, and I think fit's important for Martinez too. And certainly if he goes to pair with a scat back or a pass catching running back, I think that team could be well set in the backfield. But as far as fantasy goes, we have to understand that Damien Martinez has limitations. We understand that in a deep running back class like this, he's going to be pushed down the board. How do you feel about Damien Martinez? And quite frankly, does he have the traits that make him special enough to be more than just a guy at the next level, Brandon?
So there's actually a few running backs that you have on the list that I kind of feel the same way about. Good backs. If this was another draft class, they might be like early 4th round, but they're getting pushed down because there's so many bats in this class that are good runners and they're good receivers. So he's not necessarily a bad receiver. I just haven't seen it. He was at the Senior Bowl and he didn't really he did good stuff, but it's nothing to say, oh yeah, that guy is going to, do this. I do think it matters on fit, and I think he could be a running back too. If he comes in and impresses in camp, then he could kind of take that jump, but it all depends on that. And like I said, this running back class is just so deep, and there's not after you get past probably the top 4, there's not a huge differentiation between a bunch of them. So I don't know if NFL teams will be there's not that big of a difference. We'll wait around. So maybe they'll pick someone in the 5th or 6th rather than the 4th or late 3rd. And, draft capital always means something, especially when you get past round 1 or 2.
Let me just ask you here. Top 4 running backs. Do you have Judkins above Kaleb Johnson?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So your top 4 in no particular order. Jeanty. I guess I am going in order. Jeanty, Henderson, Hampton, Judkins. That's how you have it?
Yes.
Okay.
But I will say close is Dylan Sampson out of Tennessee.
Yeah, he's been getting it's weird because it's not weird because this draft class is so deep, but I've heard people talking him up, and you're like, yeah, he's my running back 6. He's my running back 8. But in a different year, could be running back 3 or running back 2.
Right.
It's so weird how deep this running back class is, and how we have to sort of figure out what we're doing with the position in our rookie drafts. Okay. One of the I think this is one of the players that you had talked about in your Dynasty League Football article at dynastyleaguefootball.com about players you're going to be targeting after the first round of your rookie draft. I believe RJ Harvey was on that list. And I've been hearing a lot of positive things from a lot of draft pundits out there about RJ Harvey. And it sounds like you're going to say nothing but good things about him as well. Or am I wrong? Go ahead.
No, I really like RJ Harvey. And we saw, he ran really well. I think, watching him at UCF,
I think, okay, hold on just real quick. I have to say this, and I meant to say this. Listen, nobody has a finger on the pulse closer to RJ Harvey than you do. So viewers, take this with a grain of salt. Okay. This is like Ed McMahon talking up why Johnny Carson was the greatest late night host ever. This is like talking about how Dave Grohl says there's never going to be another front man as good as Kurt Cobain. That said, I know you look at this rationally here. I probably dated myself with those references.
I will say though, one of the next running back we're going to talk about, I love more than RJ Harvey.
I know you do. And he's the guy we will talk about him because I know you like this guy quite a bit. But before we get to him, RJ Harvey is what he not only was he great for one season, he was great for multiple seasons at UCF.
Yeah, and he has the speed. He's a slasher. He has good, good hands, good cutback ability. I didn't actually get to interview him at the Senior Bowl, but just seeing how he carried himself and everything, very hard worker. And I, that the thing for me is, the combine, everyone goes crazy at the combine and the running and everything. Mm-hmm. I just think it's so crazy that like once someone runs fast, kind of him along with Matthew Golden, that's when like a lot of people start jumping on the bandwagon. I'm like, we know he's fast. Like, I mean, I don't know why just seeing him run in shorts, like make everyone go crazy, but he definitely helped himself at the combine. And, there have been rumors about the Jags liking him and, maybe around 2 or 3. So, him to be able to stay in Florida would be big. And obviously I would think one of the current running backs would get traded in that case, but a lot to think about.
It is. And certainly RJ Harvey is a guy who is building up steam right now, not unlike DJ Giddens, and perhaps more steam from Brandon Haye about DJ Giddens right now. You cannot teach athletic ability. You cannot teach God-given talent. And Giddens has a lot of it, the running back out of Kansas State. You are not the only one who has come on this show and preached about DJ Giddens being a big-time Giddens evangelist. I'm going to let you do it again here. This is a player that I was not excited about 3 months ago. And at this point in time, 2 weeks before the draft, man, I'm super excited about him. Yeah,
and one thing I noticed is just his quick acceleration. And one of the things, too, usually when running backs have good speed and quick acceleration, they always try to bounce it outside. But not him. He likes to get upfield early, into the traffic, and then he cuts outside. So get positive yards, then make people miss, get outside, can catch the ball. I think he can be a better receiver at the next level because a lot of his stuff in college was just outlet passes and everything. But I'm happy for him, too. He was like a 0-star recruit, had to work his way up. I just, really like his game. He's kind of like a even lighter version of TreVeyon Henderson in the fact that slasher, be able to pass, but on the lower end, not the same type of elite speed, but can do a lot of the similar things.
Let's talk about, okay, so I was just listening to Cecil Lammey from Football Guys talk up how he thinks Devin Neal is a 3rd-round pick this year. And to Lammy's point, I have drafted Neal in a couple of drafts already this year as my like running back 5, running back 6 or whatever. And the more I research this, the more I'm like, I should have gone like more of an upside guy here, because unlike Giddens, unlike Harvey, I don't know if he has enough athleticism, enough of that natural born talent. I don't know if he has enough of that to be successful in the NFL. Certainly what he did at Kansas was awesome, but is he going to continue that in the NFL? Even if he gets an opportunity, I'm more bearish on this than I was a couple of months ago. Devin Neal has been falling down by rankings right now. How do you feel about him, Brandon?
So when I watched Devin Neal, one thing, I was a little disappointed in his speed. I thought he was going to be a little faster. Another thing, I thought he did catch, he had 20 receptions every season. I thought he'd be a little bit better receiver, more like just an outlet guy. But one thing I will say in short area quickness, he reminded me a lot of when I watched a film of Bucky Irving last year, in between the tackles, just a short area quickness. I don't think he has a speed and as good of a pass catcher as Bucky Irving, but he's actually good in pass pro too, so that helps him stay on the field. One thing is he needs to improve on his vision and, like I said, the speed. But he has pretty good balance, kind of bounces off people, doesn't get tackled easily. He's another one, if he gets in a situation with an incumbent starter that wasn't great, like I talked about with Tampa Bay with Rachaad White, he was great receiving the ball, but running between the tackles not nearly as good. If he gets a spot like that, he could overtake that position. But I do think situation is pretty big for him.
Moving on. If I was to do this, let's bet here. Let's make a friendly wager. I'm going to put the over-under at total running back selected prior to Saturday. So this is total running back selected in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft, Brandon. If I set it at 10.5, are you taking the over or are you taking the under on 10.5 running backs selected in the first 3 rounds of the 2025 NFL draft?
Well, maybe I'm being too stingy because I was when I saw the question, I was thinking between 7 and 9, and the two that I were iffy on were ETN and Harvey, just based on I don't know if he jumped up enough. I mean, I like a lot of those guys. I just don't know how many running backs can really go in the first 3 rounds. So
right.
I have a definite 7 and 2 maybe. So I guess I would still be under.
Okay,
9.
you'll be under. Let's go through the. Can you list off the definite 7 that you have that will be going in the top 3 rounds of the NFL draft coming up in 2 weeks? Who are the definite 7?
Yeah, Jeanty, Hampton, Kaleb Johnson, TreVeyon Henderson, Judkins, Dylan Sampson, obviously DJ Giddens. Yeah, that's my 7. And then
those are your 7.
Yeah.
Okay, keep going with the maybes.
The maybes are ETN and Harvey.
Okay.
And I would say maybe after that, I would have to look at the list, but I would say Neil might be pretty close after that as well.
Okay, let me throw some names at you then. Skattebo, you think is a day 3 guy?
Yeah, I forgot about him. For me, he is, but I would get if a someone like late 3rd,
right?
Because he could probably play special teams. He's going to be a guy that like you're going to love in practice. I'm guessing,
right.
You know, probably was great in like interviews and everything like that. But for me, he's a day 3 guy.
We have not talked about what about this guy potentially going in round 3. What about Bashel Tootin?
He is another player that has really jumped up. He had a really good Senior Bowl. He ran amazingly well at the Combine. I've seen him jumping up. I think he should be like early 4th, but I mean, he could jump up to the 3rd. Because really it depends running back wise and even wide receivers. If an NFL team just falls in love with you, because we've seen that where players that should not have gone, like I hated this because I liked him coming out, Tyquan Thornton, you know, going in the 2nd round with the Patriots, way too high. Even though I loved him, way too high. And if some teams fall in love with you, they'll pick you too high just for bad reasoning.
I have learned to ignore draft capital when it comes to Patriots receivers. Just I can't. I've been burned on it so much. I'm done with it. Okay. So if I was to set the over under at 9.5, would you still take the under? The gears are turning. The smoke is coming out of Brandon Haye's head right now. It's very close, right?
Yeah, it's close. I probably would take the over, but I think one of those 2 that we just talked about might go.
So we're saying officially right now, April 10th, there will be 10 running backs chosen in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft this year.
Yep, write it down. I just said it.
Mark it down.
Declaration.
We got it. You have done some rookie profiles for Dynasty League Football, and I'd be remiss if I didn't let you talk about them a little bit because, number one, you know these guys better than me and a lot of the viewers. Number 2, we have not talked about these players a lot on this show. So tell us about Taj Brooks and why he may or may not be a dynasty sleeper in your rookie drafts this year.
Yeah, he's another one that goes into my category of really good college player. I just don't know how he translates. The thing is, like we said, there's so many running backs in this class that can do a lot of things he can do. You know, he's a good runner. Between the tackles, my biggest thing in my article I wrote about this, he's inconsistent with his power. Sometimes he looks really good with it, and sometimes not. You know, he was a good receiver. You know, one of the things in receiving that I guess puts him a little bit apart. He's not just running like angle routes or little screens and everything. He ran, you know, post routes and things down the field. He actually had a 35-yard touchdown. I believe it was against Kansas State. So he's good at avoiding defenders in the hole, and he has enough speed to get outside, but he doesn't have elite speed. I think that might be one of the reasons some of the running backs go ahead of him, like the players we talked about, Harvey, Giddens, Tootin, and those type of players that have more speed. And, you know, the NFL is going more towards those running backs that can take it all the way.
Yeah, what I love about Brooks is, well, number one, the size, like 5'10", 230. So this is not just like some undersized guy that is just going to be a scat back. This is a guy who has had back-to-back 1,500-plus rushing seasons with Texas Tech and never caught 30 passes in a season. But bear in mind, the last 3 years, he caught above 25 passes all 3 years. Gets into the end zone, 17 rushing touchdowns, 18 total touchdowns last year. He's the type of guy, Brandon, that will be around in the late third round of my rookie drafts, the fourth round of my rookie drafts. And I will take a chance on him because a lot of times all these guys need is an opportunity. I understand the path for him to becoming or to go from college football standout to fantasy difference maker. It's a long, winding path that he's probably not going to get there. But I can see the light at the end of the tunnel with Taj Brooks that I may not be able to see with some of the other guys going in the third and fourth round, especially some of these receivers this year as well. That's Brooks. Let's talk about Woody Marks, the guy who kind of took over more or less for Marshawn Lloyd at USC. 5'10", 210, 1,100 plus rushing yards this past year, 9 touchdowns. Certainly there's some things to like, but there's also some warts here in this profile, which is going to make him a day 3 pick. Why do we need to not forget about him, at least for our dynasty rookie drafts?
Yeah, I'm not going to lie. He played at Mississippi State before. I obviously knew his name. I didn't watch a lot of tape, but, I watched him at USC, and he does have the speed. He's a better runner between the tackles than I thought he'd be. He's not like Omarion Hampton kind of runner, but better than that. And he does show off some nice hands and has kind of a little bit of advanced route tree. One thing, he struggles blocking. There was a couple games I watched where he missed a block and it caused a fumble from the quarterback. So these type of players, they have to be able to shore that up because as a running back, especially if you're going to play on third down, you're going to have to be able to protect the passer.
Yeah, and I think that's a huge thing. I mean, like all these things, I think with running back more so than I would say more so than anybody else because you got to be able to block if you're a receiver. We want these guys on the field, and if you can't protect the quarterback, that's not going to get you on the field at all as far as Woody Marks goes and other players of his ilk. So let's take our final break. When we come back, I want to talk about the receivers as much as we can here, and I know it's not a ton of time, but I have to know how you fall into the Travis Hunter dilemma that's going on right now. I want to talk about Emeka Egbuka, and let's talk about, we have not talked about Ricky White on the show. Let's make sure we talk about him too. So plenty of rookie wide receiver discussion coming up prior to your rookie drafts, prior to the NFL draft. He is Brandon Haye from Dynasty League Football and theleaguewinners.com. Follow him on the X at HayB3. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Stick around. We come back right after this.
Andrew Cooper here of Fantasy Alarm, and if you're anything like me, football season never ends. Super Bowl's over. Who cares? We got a lot of speculation to do, and the best way to take advantage of that is at myffpc.com. Mock drafts are fun. They're fine. But if you really want to get leverage, get in one of their never too early best ball drafts or never too early super flex drafts now where you can take advantage of all your takes. I'm in there now because I got hunches, right? I got ideas for free agency. I got ideas for the drafts. I got ideas for the 2025 NFL season, and I want to get them on paper now. And I want to do so before the NFL draft, right? Before the cat's out of the bag. That's the beauty of these contests, right? You go in and you get set up, and the drafts are already going, and they end on April 24th, right when the NFL draft starts. So you can get in there, get all your takes in, take advantage of everything before everybody finds out what happens. Use promo code ALARM at myffpc.com when you get set up. They'll give you $25 when you deposit $35 or more, and you can get in these tournaments, the never too early best ball and the never too early super flex contest to get your shot at $10,000 or $40,000 grand prizes.
The never too early best ball tournament is something that you want to be taking advantage of right now. If for no other reason, then we can't offer these contests 2 weeks from today. It's been great. A lot of people have been signing up for them. $40,000 grand prize, $10,000 grand prize in the Superflex version. You can join that for $35 or the classic version for $125. 30-second, 60-second, 2-hour, and 6-hour clocks available at myffpc.com. That is where to go. And of course, if you want more info on everything Brandon Haye's doing, you go to theleaguewinners.com. You go to dynastyleaguefootball.com. You go to x.com/bhay3. Brandon, we have to kick off this segment fast here because time is running short. I have gone back and forth on this, and I think I'm fourth. I'm back, not fourth on this. Travis Hunter is a fantasy landmine, man. the good part about it is once our rookie draft start after the NFL draft, I think we'll have more information on how a team at least is telling us how they want to use them. But I am really, really nervous about him right now. I've drafted him in one league so far, just in the hopes that, like, super late, obviously, just in the hopes that he does play a lot of receiver this year. But I'm nervous about this. I don't even like, he could play 60% offense and 40% defense or something of that ilk, or maybe 60-60, and that's still not great. How are you treating Travis Hunter in your drafts right now, or in your rookie drafts? How do you think the team that drafts him is going to utilize him this year?
That's the thing. Yeah, I mean, certain teams, I don't know how they're going to use him. Like, say, if the Patriots took him, I wouldn't like that. But some other teams, I'm not necessarily sure. Yeah, I don't want him to go to the Jags, but actually, I think they might have a way to use him. My worries is he's a tremendous athlete, great player, great speed. As a wide receiver, I think he can grow a lot more. As a route runner, a lot of Colorado was kind of like, just get open and we'll throw the ball up to you, which he did an amazing job. He, like I said, great athlete. It's just I worry if he's splitting time between offense and defense, how much is he going to improve each year on offense?
God, I didn't think about the improvement aspect. That's something to think about too. I just think when you get to this level, you have to be fully dedicated to one position. You think about some of these other guys like Deion Sanders, Charles Woodson is another guy. They were dominant on one side of the ball and not necessarily the other, where they just kind of moonlighted. Now, they didn't play both levels or both ways like Hunter did in college. So this is the outlier. We've never had anything like this. Me personally, when I see an outlier like this where I have no precedent, I'm usually letting somebody else make that decision for me, and I'll go with somebody safer. But there's a point in the rookie draft, late first round, early second round. If Hunter's still out there, he's going to be hard to pass up for me. Matthew Golden, a player that, and I don't know, Brandon, how you fall in on this, but the footage that has been out there about potentially not starting the clock at the right time for Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden's 40. We've seen stuff side by side with them where it looked like Bond actually ran faster than Golden. Golden refused to run a second 40 at the combine. And why would he? I mean, I would have done the same thing if I were him, because his draft stock has shot up to the point where some fantasy pundits out there are saying he is the wide receiver one, ahead of Travis Hunter, ahead of Teteroa McMillan. Are you in on Matthew Golden right now, or are you out on him, knowing that we don't want to double count for speed, but knowing that he never really won with speed at Texas? He won with tactical aspects of his route running. The point is here, he won. I don't want to say in spite of poor speed, because he always had great speed. But you look at what he did in college, and you watch his tape, you're like, okay, this guy is just a good receiver, and now he's got a 4.29 40 under his belt as well. Are you in or out on him?
So I'm definitely in. I at first was one of the people that had him as wide receiver one. Now I'm kind of waffling, you can say a little bit, but watching him, there are different things he needs to work on. Some of the things are released sometimes against press coverage. I think he needs the right scheme because Texas moved him around, kind of got him open. But his speed, he might not see it on routes, but defenders were playing like 10 yards off the ball on short routes. If he made one little fake move outside, he could cut across the middle. I think that's the best. He was able to get, separation across the middle. And also on his size, he's better than I anticipated as a blocker. And, a lot of people say, that won't help with fantasy. No, it won't, but it'll help you stay on the field for every down if you can block.
I think so. Okay, prior to the 40, prior to the 40s at the combine, did you have Golden still above Bond for Texas?
Yes, I did.
You did. Okay, all right. Okay, so then that makes sense, and we obviously put more credence into that for sure going forward. Tet McMillan, everybody who watches the show every Thursday knows I have some misgivings about him. The fact that he is a little bit bigger and failed to gain separation, and there's not a good track record of that in the pros. Is it wrong to be worried about Tet McMillan? How do you have him ranked right now, Brandon?
Yeah, he's a tough one for me because some of the same concerns you're talking about is concerns I had with Drake London. And he's, he's turned out to be a pretty good receiver. I had worries about his separation. Take it back to the Jaguars. A lot of Jaguar fans say they'll take him at 5. I do not want him in the top 5.
No,
I do not. I don't think in the top 15. He's a first round player, just not a top 10 player. And just because the wide receiver class isn't as high as like last year, I wouldn't bump him up that high.
Ted McMillan, much to the reciprocal effect of running backs who would be higher picked in any other draft, McMillan probably would not be thought about as a slam dunk first round pick in some other drafts. Think about last year. Ted McMillan, there's no way he goes in the first round, right? No. But now he's talked about more often than not as a first round pick. Emeka Egbuka, I have said that this guy is the highest floor guy of any receiver in the draft, higher than Burden, higher than McMillan, higher than Hunter, but definitely not the highest ceiling. And I think a lot of times in Dynasty Fantasy Football, we want to draft the highest ceiling. And maybe there is a ceiling with Egbuka I'm not seeing. What do you think after researching, reading what other people are saying, listening to what other people are saying? What do you think the biggest misconception is about Emeka Egbuka heading into the 2025 NFL draft?
I guess some people are just thinking that he's not a game breaker. Obviously, he's probably going to play in the slot. I think he's going to be very similar, not the same skill set, but success in the NFL early as Chris Olave, also from Ohio State. I always thought they would be better NFL players than they are college players. And this last year, he had over 1,000 yards while Jeremiah Smith was getting all the catches and everything too at Ohio State. He has great hands. He excels in the middle of the field, and with more spread offenses, I think if he gets to the right team and takes over the slot, I think he could be very much like, say, what Zay Flowers did in his rookie year.
Oh, okay. All right. And then obviously, if he hits, I feel like Egbuka, if he hits this year, that's like a win for like 7 years for your dynasty team. This is a guy who can continue what he's been doing his rookie year for and maybe even gets better. Maybe even his ceiling goes even higher, and we start expecting more of him going forward with Egbuka. Luther Burden is another guy. I remember, and I always say this too, like when after the NFL draft ends, I always look at, because all the pundits put out their following year mock draft, right? And I noticed in a lot of them after the 2024 draft, the only receiver that was mentioned in the first round, in most of them, not all of them, was Luther Burden. Like, that's the thing. Ted McMillan wasn't mentioned in any of these. Luther Burden over and over again. In fact, sometimes as high as a top 10 pick. And now he has a bad 2024. You can blame that on a lot of things, maybe on Burden, maybe on a supporting cast, maybe on some different things. But I feel like the way he wins, you have to be able to utilize him right. You have to accentuate his strengths, right? And I think much in the same sense we talked about with Kaleb Johnson earlier, maybe landing spot is equally or even more important with Luther Burden, which draft capital gets factored into that as well. But when you think about how a team utilizes Burden, is that how important is that to his NFL success? Because you don't want him getting into the wrong situation and then not being utilized right and then just languishing on the bench. You have to have a team that is going to be willing to commit to Burden, to getting him the football in places where he can win, in places where he can make a difference, maybe more so than a lot of the receivers in this draft.
No, I definitely agree. I mean, Burden was like one of the top recruits when he came. Surprised a lot of people by going to Missouri, and I think this last year definitely hurt him because the offense wasn't as great, not as creative to get him the ball. I was watching another video from Dynasty Nerds, and they said that until he gets the ball, he doesn't go to full speed. Like once the ball's in his hand, but like sometimes on the routes, if he's not getting the ball, he doesn't, put forth the effort. So maybe that's some coaching, but I do agree. And, a couple players that I really like coming out, Rondale Moore and Elijah Moore, I think they went to teams that didn't use them well. And, you can't just throw 2-yard passes to them consistently because obviously the defense is going to come up on that and they're not going to be able to make many plays. And you just got to find different ways to, get him the ball. I mean, he probably is not going here, but think what Andy Reid could do with him in Kansas City, McVay and with the Rams, those type of teams. But if you go somewhere like Pittsburgh, I would not want to touch him if he went to Pittsburgh because Arthur Smith has no creativity whatsoever.
You mentioned both the Moores, Rondale Moore, now in Minnesota, Elijah Moore, obviously in Cleveland. You think either of those teams are going to unlock the potential for the Moores this year?
I don't think consistently. I think Rondale Moore, if he's healthy, could be like a best ball type player for Minnesota, because he's going to have like a couple of those games where he goes crazy. But I just don't know if and who knows with the Cleveland quarterback situation, I just don't necessarily trust that.
Following in our conversation of players we have not talked about a lot on the show is Alec Iamaner. Mostly because, well, not because, but like I still don't even know how to pronounce his name. Is it Iamaner? Is it Iamaner? I've heard both ways. I'm going to go with Iamaner. I don't know, Brandon, if you have a thought on this. Is it Iamaner?
I don't know, but it's funny. I actually wrote an article on him. I think it was for DLF, but for some reason, I kept on thinking his name was Eric. So like throughout the whole thing, and they had to come back, and then the editor came back and was like, "You spelled his name wrong." And I was like, Eric is easy to spell. And then I actually Googled it. I was like, oh man, that is not an R. Anyway.
It's spelled ELIC, but it's pronounced Eric. I totally get it. One of the best. Well, hold on. Well, just real quick. I'll set you up for this. One of the things I've heard about him is he's a really good blocker. I've seen it on tape. He is a good blocker in the run game. And a lot of teams, like the Green Bay Packers, value run blocking with their receivers. So he seems to me like he would be a second-round pick. I've heard him comped as far as fantasy goes to Michael Wilson, and maybe not even non-fantasy as well. But how much more in your research of Alec Iamaner, a.k.a. Eric Iamaner, how much more than a blocker is he going to be at the next level?
I think he can be much more than a blocker. Just watching him, and a lot of people, probably the biggest thing is he had a huge game against Travis Hunter 2 years ago. A lot of big catches. One thing he does really good is I think he uses his body well. He can be a vertical threat, has a good release and balance. One thing is, I don't know if this was a Stanford thing. He ran like 3 different routes. Like that's all he ran. So I don't know if that's like an offensive thing because their quarterback play was bad too. So maybe that can change. But I do see some traits. I actually put I looked. They have similar size, him and Gabe Davis. So I saw like similar things in that, where kind of a down the field guy, not a high volume guy, but maybe gets you like 2 or 3 catches and maybe one of them's like a 50-yard bomb. That type of thing, like high risk, high reward type player, which isn't what you always want fantasy wise. But if he's like, say you draft him and you can play him in like a flex or something, you're willing to take that risk there when he could give you like wide receiver two type production there.
One of the players that really made a name for himself at the Senior Bowl, which you said you were at, right, this year?
Yes.
Okay, so this is going to be good. We talk about Tez Johnson. Everything I read, in fact, I probably ingested a lot of your ex posts and your coverage on this. Tez Johnson was awesome at the Senior Bowl. There were the best corners. Azaria Thomas, from Florida State, was lining up against Tez Johnson in the one-on-ones because he just felt like, okay, this is the guy I can show out on if I stop this guy. And he couldn't. And no one could. Tez Johnson was awesome. However, I've eaten meals heavier than him, which is a problem in the NFL.
Yeah.
When you think about Tez Johnson as an NFL prospect, how concerned are you about him weighing in at 156 pounds or whatever it is? The track record of players that light, I don't even know if there is a track record, but track record of wide receivers that light, not really full of fantasy goodness here. Tez Johnson is not going to be drafted super high, obviously. But when you think about wherever he lands, how do you feel about him?
Yeah, he definitely was impressive at the Senior Bowl, but this is what I kept on saying. The Senior Bowl is perfect for him. Like it's just one-on-ones, and people aren't going to be able to keep up with that speed. Like they're not really like putting their hands on you and those type of things there. But yeah, that's a big concern, I think. Tutu Atwell has kind of made a little bit out of himself, but I mean, let's say Tez Johnson is Tutu Atwell, you're not getting excited about that. No. It's not something you consistently can start. So I'm gonna be totally honest, unless like I can get Tez Johnson in the 4th round, or unless someone drafts him like 2nd round in the NFL draft, I'm going to steer clear just because the odds are against him succeeding with that small size.
I'm going to do something I've never done on the show before. I'm going to put up my hands here. This side right now, hold on, I'm going to move it right here. This side is Tutu Atwell, okay? This side right here is Tank Dell, okay? Where would you put Tez Johnson as far as Tank Dell and Tutu Atwell goes? Where does he fall into that equation?
Oh.
Like, who's he more comparable to, I guess, is what I can ask you. Like, is it more fair to compare him to Tank Dell, or is it more fair to compare him to Tutu Atwell? Because those are the two guys. Anytime I talk about Tez Johnson, Brandon, those are the two guys I always think of.
I would say closer to Tank Dell, just because I think he can do more things as route running wise. I think he's a very good route runner. Mm-hmm. And with Tutu, I think he did a lot with just pure speed. So I would put it closer to Tank Dell, but I would think, honestly, I'd put him somewhere in the middle between the two.
All right. So it's in the middle, leaning towards Dell, which I get.
Yes.
And quite frankly, it may not make a difference in rookie drafts, because unless that guy gets day 2 draft capital, we're probably not going to be falling all over ourselves to draft him. Right. Ricky White, have not talked about this guy at all the last 3 months on this show. One of these day 3 guys that could stand out. Certainly don't want to compare anybody to Puka Nacua, but Ricky White, certainly a guy that could show out if he lands in the right spot, gets the opportunity. How do you feel about Ricky White at the next level?
I'm probably going to draft a ton of Ricky White in Dynasty rookie drafts. I love him. He's a great route runner. He creates separation. He's great in the middle level. In the 10 to 20 yard range, I saw he had caught 22 of 38 passes for 416 yards and 5 touchdowns. He's just really good in that area, and I think there's a spot for him in the NFL in that sense. He's probably going to play in the slot mostly, but he can play out wide. I like the versatility of players that can do that. Like you said, he's probably a day 3 guy, but I think he's one of those guys that could really impress and could play early. So he's one of the ones that, if I see him probably early 3rd, still around, as long as he doesn't go undrafted or something like that, right, I would definitely jump on drafting him.
This is why we pay attention to day 3. I'm bringing my son up to the draft I'm going all 3 days, as I said earlier, but I'm bringing my 11-year-old son up on Saturday. And I know he's going to want to run the 40 at Lambeau Field. He's going to want to do all these things, but I'm going to be paying attention. Like, hey, where's Nick Nash going? Hey, who drafted Ricky White? Players like that, because they matter for fantasy and for dynasty, depending upon how deep your league is. And if you are playing in those deep leagues, or even maybe shallow leagues, go to dynastyleaguefootball.com. Check out everything Brandon Haye has to say about dynasty leagues out there. And of course, theleaguewinners.com. You are covering the University of Central Florida. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I just started that this year. So since February, I've probably done 10 or 12 interviews with different players, 2026 recruits. And I went down for the practice last Saturday. Actually, tomorrow I will be going for another practice, and then at the game this coming fall, I will be in a more not professional, but getting the press pass and everything. Right now, I'm kind of just going from the stands and watching everything.
That's more professional. Getting the press pass, I would say, is more professional.
I was like, I know that's not the right word, but that's what kept on popping into my head.
So anything about the Knights, theleaguewinners.com is where to go. And Brandon will have you covered. You can always go to you are on Blue Sky as well at HayB3 there, and HayB3 on X. That's HAYEB3. Dynasty League Football is where to go for all of his dynasty content. Do you have Devy content that we can follow for anybody playing in Devy leagues?
I will start usually in the off season at DLF. I do kind of buy, sell, hold type article for Debbie.
Okay,
so I'll
cool.
be starting those up in May, but not as much as I used to do. But yeah, I do have some of that content, and during the season, I will have more content as well.
Oh, well, we will looking forward to that, and we will be following you to make sure we are made aware every time that that content is made live. Brandon, so much fun tonight. We could have done another 3 hours easily. We will have you back on this show for sure, especially during Dynasty season, as we're just 2 weeks out from the NFL draft. A lot of great stuff that you brought to the table tonight that has me reevaluating my opinions, and I know a lot of the viewers doing the same thing. Brandon, thank you so much, man.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime. I want to thank Brandon Haye, our producer, Matt Deutsch. We'll be back next Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern time, Under the Helmet. Dynasty Think Tank and Football Guys' own Chad Parsons will co-host the show with me again. Play the FFPC Never Too Early Best Ball tournaments, the FFPC Big Gorilla Tournament, and all those Dynasty Orphans down to under 100. The best deals out there that you're going to find with the FFPC at myffpc.com. myffpc.com is where to go for that. For Matt Deutsch, for Brandon Haye, I'm Eric Balkman. This has been the FFPC High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Have a great weekend, everybody.